Every Wednesday, we bring you GroundUp, who publishes news that matters every week, every Wednesday at this time. We speak to one of the editorial team to find out what stories they've been working on. They publish original public interest news focusing on areas like education, health, sanitation, migration, human rights stories, and we're joined this morning by reporter Jesse Copelyn. And this week you've been following particularly public health stories. Jesse, good morning. Something that we have spoken about before is a recent report of how heroin use has spread across South Africa because prices are plummeting.
Hi, Lester. Good to be with you. Yeah, that's correct. Recent research has shown that the price of heroin pretty much across South Africa is, in real terms, a lot lower than what it was about 20 years ago. And over the same period that real price of heroin has dropped, the actual rate at which people are using heroin has increased. And that's been shown through a range of different methods, whether it's just from looking at the percentage of people who are coming into rehabs and finding out what the reason is for them coming into rehabs. The heroin is the reason more and more frequently over time. And you can also see that from just looking at the amount of heroin that's been seized each year by the police over time.
And also South Africa's central position as part of a global drug smuggling route between West Asia and Europe. That's also playing a role.
That has played a central role. Essentially what happened was that heroin is produced in Afghanistan. Well, that's where poppy is cultivated, which is what heroin is made from. And then it's often manufactured into heroin in Pakistan. And then to get it into markets in Europe, the way that historically that was done was that you would drive it to Europe via land. So you would drive the heroin from Pakistan into Iran, on into Turkey, and then on into Europe. Over time, the Europeans started policing those borders a lot more. And so the drug syndicates increasingly pivoted away from that land route. And instead, what they did is they would ship it along the Indian Ocean. They'd ship it from Pakistan to East Africa or to Southern Africa. And even if they did ship it to Eastern Africa, they would then drive it down quite frequently to South Africa. And then they would fly it from there onward to Europe. So there was sort of more and more heroin that ended up passing through South Africa's borders over time. And while a lot of that was in transit, increasingly dealers ended up creating these spin-off markets for local consumption. And so the total supply of heroin just increased more and more over time. And that's partially why you see these large drops in price, and that's why it also just why you ended up having these sort of cheap heroin markets that proliferated across the townships.
Heroin, largely an injectable drug, and the next two stories are connected. One aspect is how government is hindering its own drug policies with some push and pull between local and provincial government when it comes to needle replacement programs. But at the same time, there's been an alarming rise in HIV and STI infection or blood-borne disease infection among drug users because government failing to implement needle replacement policies.
Yeah, that's correct. And there was a recent study that showed that the rates of HIV were very, very high among people who inject drugs across different South African cities. They're much higher than what they were just even 6 or 7 years ago. And a big reason for that is that people, when they don't have access to clean needles, share needles. And when they share needles, it spreads bloodborne diseases. And so one, basic way that people propose dealing with that problem is that you provide heroin users or people who inject drugs with clean needles. And if you provide them with clean needles, then you eliminate the need for them to share. And dozens of studies from around the world have found that when you do that, you do bring down the rates at which new HIV cases happen. So it's a very consistent finding. And so the South African government has supported that policy, a policy of providing users with clean needles. And the Western Cape government has also supported that policy. But on the ground locally, what we often see is that when those programs do get rolled out, often like local level officials, ward councillors, municipal officials end up shutting those programs down. So that happened in Durban, for instance, from 2018 to 2020. There was a big needle and syringe program that got shut down by the municipality there. And here in Cape Town, there was a program that got shut down by the municipality in the Wynberg area after complaints and concerns were expressed by the ward councillor and the local community here.
Jesse Copelyn, really appreciate your time. We're in fact going to be speaking to Dr. Andrew Scheib, who is a researcher at the University of Pretoria's Department of Family Medicine, talking about needle replacement programs. But GroundUp, they don't run adverts on their website, and the articles are available free to read, but they are non-profit and they rely a lot on donations. So go to groundup.org.za to read the articles that were mentioned here today, and of course others, and you can just click on the donate tab and you can continue supporting public interest journalism.